The Fantastic Four, Marvel's first family of superheroes. As you probably know, a brand new feature film is currently in production. It just started filming last week in London, I think in Leavesden Studios, as part of Phase 6 of the ongoing MCU. And in the wake of the huge success of Deadpool versus Wolverine, Deadpool and Wolverine, I think that hopes are quite high that Marvel may be back on track, and this is a project which a lot of people are very much looking forward to, myself included, because I'm a big fan of the Fantastic Four. I remember reading the comics back in the 1960s. I was aware of them, then became more aware of them in 1972 when Marvel UK started up with the Mighty World of Marvel, and I started to get immersed in the world of Marvel superheroes and the whole chronology and the canon and so on. And I'm looking forward to seeing the Fantastic Four on the big screen. But they've been there before, haven't they? They've been there before in several previous iterations of the Fantastic Four. There was the much derided Roger Corman version that was made back in the 1980s that never got released. It was a low-budget film. New Horizon Studios, owned by Roger Corman, they created this film. And it was pretty much a placeholder. I think it was made really just to keep the rights to the Fantastic Four in place. So this is a film that was made, never intended to be released, and indeed it was never released. Although, if you know where to look, you can find it. I wouldn't bother. And then, of course, we had Tim Story's Fantastic Four and the Fantastic Four Rise of the Silver Surfer, which came out in 2005 and 2007, respectively. Hits at the box office, but the second one not a big enough hit to proceed with the planned third film. And then, of course, we had Josh Trank's version, which we prefer not to talk about. That came out in 2015. Fan four-stick, as most people call it, due to the stupid logo that the film was lumbered with. And it was pretty disastrous, and the Fantastic Four sort of sank back into development hell. But now they're back with Marvel. Marvel have taken back a lot of the properties that belonged to Sony and 20th Century Fox. X-Men are coming to the MCU, the Fantastic Four are coming to the MCU. But for the purposes of this video, and this rather long-winded introduction, I'm going to take us back to 2005 and 2007. I'm going to revisit Tim Story's Fantastic Four films, because they get a bad rap. People don't really regard them very highly. People think that they're crap, basically. I disagree, as you'll find out now. Hello, welcome back to my world of stuff. My name, it be Paul Mount. Thank you for watching. If you're new here, do me a favour. Press that like button and subscribe button. Thumbs up, leave a comment. Join the fun of my world of stuff. It'd be nice to get the subscribers up. Welcome aboard to some new subscribers who've arrived in the last few days. Quite surprisingly, because I've not posted a video since the weekend, and it's now Thursday, so welcome those people who've just come in out of curiosity. So please stick around, there's loads of stuff to come on this channel, more of which at the end of this video. Right, let's go back to the Fantastic Four films from 2005 and 2007. 2005 was the first of the Fantastic Four films from 20th Century Fox, directed by Tim Story. Tim Story, looking at his filmography, he's a bit of a director of sort of light comedy, drama, thriller type things. He's done things like Ride Along and Ride Along 2. Most recently, he did The Blackening, a comedy film which came out last year, which sort of subverted the horror trope of the black person always being the first one killed in a horror film. So he's got a sort of lighter touch when it comes to directing, and he's done quite a lot of stuff over the years. He's done some TV, he's done lots of music videos, and he's done quite a few films. And when you look at the Fantastic Four films, you can see him bringing his lighter touch to Marvel characters. Now, I've rewatched these films in the last couple of days. Fantastic Four from 2005 and its follow-up 2007's Fantastic Four Rise of the Silver Surfer. And as I said, these films get slated quite a lot by fans. And I think you can understand why, really. I mean, bearing in mind, once again, we have to bear in mind that these films were pre-Marvel, pre-MCU. They were just rogue, random superhero films that 20th Century Fox made. It was before Iron Man. In fact, the second one came out the year before Iron Man. And that, of course, kicked off this phenomenon that's become the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So there's nothing to compare with in terms of what else was around at the time. These days, we're used to Sony's disastrous attempts at making films based on their subsidiary Marvel characters like Morbius and Madam Web, which came out recently. Pretty disastrous films. Even the Venom films, although they're successful, they're really not very good. And the third one doesn't look as if it's going to finish the trilogy in any great style. So there's nothing to compare with in terms of what else was around at the time. Plus, Sony don't have a great reputation now. Superhero stuff really is Marvel. DC don't deliver the goods very often. But we're going back to 2005, before this massive explosion of superhero cinema. And taking on its own terms, I think Fantastic Four is quite a good film. Now, I sort of champion these films anyway, because I remember enjoying them at the time. And it was interesting to go back and see them because people really don't regard them very highly. And that's because Marvel have redefined superhero cinema and done it properly, I suppose. They've treated it with reverence and respect, but with increasing amounts of levity in recent years. And I think it's the levity that strikes you most about watching the Fantastic Four film now. I think the first thing to say about this film is that the casting is fantastic. I can't imagine a better cast being assembled at that time period for a Fantastic Four film. Now, the new film that's currently in production has got a good cast. It's got Pedro Pascal from The Last of Us and The Mandalorian. It's got Vanessa Kirby. We've seen her most recently in the last Mission Impossible film. It's got Joseph Quinn from Stranger Things. We've seen him more recently in Quiet Place Day One. And it's got Ebon Moss-Bachrach. I don't know him personally or professionally, I don't know him at all, as Ben Grimm, the Thing. But this 2005 film had a great cast, and you watch them and you think, oh, these people just embody those comic characters in a way. They embody what Stanley and Jack Kirby created back in the 60s, the style of the characters, not so much the personalities, because that's an issue I'll talk about in a moment, but certainly the look of them is fantastic. You have Ioan Gruffudd, famous Welsh actor, playing Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic. Jessica Alba, she was sort of hot at the time. She's still quite hot. From things like Dark Angel on TV. She plays Sue Storm, the Invisible Woman. We have Michael Chiklis, who is fresh from that cop series, The Shield, which I remember seeing some episodes of The Shield and thought this was quite interesting, but never went back to it. He plays Ben Grimm, or The Thing. And we have, of course, we have Chris Evans, 28 at the time, playing Johnny Storm, Sue's brother, the impulsive, hedonistic Johnny Storm, who becomes the Human Torch. Interesting, of course, to see him in this, because he went on to play Captain America and become a phenomenon in the MCU as the original Captain America. It's a great cast. They look the part. They look right. They look like the people that, not so much that they're comics accurate in their look, but they inhabit these characters and they bring them to the screen in a way that you think, yeah, these sort of resemble what I think those characters would look like. Particularly Michael Chiklis, who's that big sort of beefy, stocky physique. And then when he becomes the Thing, the makeup for the Thing, incidentally, is fantastic. The orange rock type look, it's really very well done. It's a fantastic bodysuit. So they look fantastic. They are fantastic. They're the Fantastic Four. So obviously they look fantastic. But they just embody those characters. For me, they embodied the way I'd envisaged those characters when I read those strips 20, 30 years before. What lets the film down, though, I have to say, is its tone. It is tonally inconsistent. The core plot is really interesting. It's got these four characters. They work together as a team of scientists. They go into space. They get bombarded with cosmic radiation. On board the ship is also Victor Von Doom, who's a scientist who works with Reed Richards. His origin is slightly different to the maniacal villain from the comic books. Here he's played by Julian McMahon, with quite fruity relish as the villain. He's also aboard the spaceship. When they wake up back on Earth, they all discover, to various degrees, that their bodies have been mutated. Their genetic makeup has been influenced and affected by the cosmic radiation. And they can all do incredible, fantastic things. You have Mr. Fantastic, Reed Richards. He can extend and elasticate his body. Johnny Storm is the Human Torch. He can burst into flames and fly. Sue Storm is the Invisible Girl. She can not exactly become invisible, but she can manipulate light so that she appears to become invisible. And of course, we've got Ben Grimm, who suffers the worst fate when his body is transformed into this great, hulking, great big orange pile of rocks. I will say again, as I always say about these old films when I look back at them, about the visual effects. The visual effects are really good. The space scenes are really good. The effects for the transformations are really good. The Invisible Girl's invisibility is done well. The Human Torch looks great. The Thing costume, as I already mentioned, is a really good bodysuit costume. And even Mr. Fantastic's elasticating stuff. It has a certain falseness to it, of course, because the human body can't do what he does in this film. But I think they do it quite well, those scenes where he stretches his arms or stretches his body. I think it's all done very well. Victor Von Doom, of course, he has a different problem. He's already a subtly evil or manipulative character, and his body seems to be transforming into sort of metal. Metal is poking through his skin, and his arm is changing to metal, and eventually takes on the cloak sort of look that we know from the comics. What lets the film down, though, as I said, is this inconsistent tone. So you've got these serious elements to the story, with the Fantastic Four having their transformation and discovering these powers. You've got Victor Von Doom as the villain, who's got his own agenda, and that's quite dark and quite sinister and well played. But then you've got moments of silly slapstick comedy, frankly, and that's the only way I can describe it. It is a bit light, and I think that's signposted by one of those slightly silly, quirky soundtracks, to remind you, this is funny, by the way, this is quirky. And they're playing silly games and stunts, and there's lots of visual things that upset the dramatic tone of the rest of it. Now, I'm not suggesting that this should be completely deadpan. I'm not suggesting it should be played completely straight. I think Marvel have learned you've got to have some humour in these films. But I think it just swings too far too quickly in this. You've got dramatic things happening. All of a sudden, there's a bit of slapstick. And then it veers back into drama, and then it gets silly again, which inevitably leads the film to feel a little bit unbalanced, because you never really know where you are with it. I think in terms of the visuals, I think there's some good stuff here, but it's not big in the way that superhero films will become big later on. There's a couple of really good set pieces. I think my favourite is the bit where Ben Grimm has escaped from hospital. He's become the Thing. He's escaped from hospital. The rest of the Fantastic Four try to find him. And he's on Brooklyn Bridge. Poor old Brooklyn Bridge. Always gets the brunt of it in superhero films. There's a massive car smash up. Fire trucks tumbling over the edge of the bridge. People hanging onto ladders. That's very well done. And the effects look really good. And it's an exciting scene. At the end, there's a sort of final battle with Doctor Doom in his transformed form. Looks fine, but it doesn't look... It's not a big finale that you'd expect in a superhero film. It's quite flat in a way. They defeat him fairly easily. It's well done, as I say, the effects look fine, but it doesn't build and build and build. You suddenly get this finale that lands on you. The film isn't helped by the fact it's quite short. It's 92 minutes, I think, or 95 minutes or something. So it's quite a short film. We're used again to superhero films and big blockbuster films running to over 2 hours, which I often think is too much. I think an hour 45, an hour and 50 does the job. This could have done with an extra 10, 50 minutes, could have done with a couple more set pieces. But all in all, it's not a bad little film. It's entertaining. If you set aside everything you know about superhero films that followed it and the way they approached it in a different way, if you take this for what it is, as something fairly light, I think you'll quite enjoy it. If you're a fan, if you're a devotee of Marvel and particularly the Fantastic Four, although I understand that the Fantastic Four are sort of out of fashion in the comic book world itself, but I think if you're a fan of classic comics and things, you might get a bit irritated by its flippancy. I'm thinking of scenes particularly where you get scenes where the Thing is agonising about, his predicament where he's transformed into this creature, and he obviously wants to come back. His girlfriend Debbie, played by Lauren Holden, who was in The Walking Dead, she sort of dumps him as soon as she sees him. But he meets up with Alicia, who's his blind girlfriend, who I remember from the comics. He meets up with her very quickly, and that sort of makes everything all right again. He's got a girlfriend now. That sorts out all his problems. He loses all the angst about being the monster. He wants to become human again, and then he's not that fussed. And there's a couple of odd editing choices. Maybe I'd lost concentration at some points. But he transforms back into Ben Grimm, and then he becomes the Thing again. And I don't know if I missed a scene where the transformation goes wrong again. There's a few odd editing things which cause an actor to feel a little bit bumpy. But I think overall, I think the main takeaway from this film and the sequel that I'll talk about next is that the cast is so good. They gel really well together. I don't know, obviously, how they got on set, but they look as if they're having a good time. Chris Evans is great because he's still quite young. I mean, I wouldn't say he looks decrepit now, but he's a young man in this, and I think they play well to that sort of lightheartedness of that character and the way he sort of He wants a good time, he wants the flash car, he wants the girls, he wants to be adored, he wants to be a superhero. And I think that comes across really well. I think it stumbles, as I say, because the tone is up and down and it's not serious enough when it needs to be for long enough, and the comedy gets a bit tiresomely slapstick. But all in all, I think it's a pretty good effort, and I give Fantastic Four from 2005, I'm going to give that 7 out of 10. 2 years later, we had the sequel, again directed by Tim Story, same cast, pretty much almost the same cast completely, and it was all four, plus Julian McMahon as Dr. Doom. Plus we get the Silver Surfer, a legendary classic Marvel superhero comic. I know that he was quite regarded very highly, certainly when I was reading comics, because we hadn't seen a lot of him. He had a short run of his own comics. And I know that Stan Lee from Marvel was so proprietorial about the character, he wouldn't let anybody else write his stories. Now, because I'm not into comics now, I don't know how he's been integrated since then or how he's been used since then. But certainly at the time of this film, he was still a fairly major character that people treated with some reverence because of who he was. He was the herald of Galactus, this monstrous creature, this tyrant who stormed across the universe devouring planets. Here he's brought to life by motion capture CGI, which I think is pretty good. It does look, that looks a bit dated now, but it's done fairly well. The voice is by Lawrence Fishburne. The body itself is Doug Jones, and I believe that Doug Jones, when he did the motion capture or the CGI modelling or whatever it was, didn't realise his voice wasn't going to be used. So we've got Lawrence Fishburne giving the Surfer a bit of gravitas. The story starts with the Fantastic Four, adored and worshipped as sort of superheroes. They've clearly had other adventures, other things have happened to them. But Sue Storm and Reed Richards are finally getting married. The wedding is coming up, but there's a threat coming from space. Strange things are happening. This shooting figure is hurtling across the world, freezing seas, causing disruption, causing chaos. Massive energy surges, cosmic disruptions. Reed Richards obviously is concerned about this. He's approached by the military to try and find a way to work out what it is. But because of his upcoming nuptials, he refuses to help them and concentrates on the wedding. But he is actually secretly helping them behind the scenes. On the day of the wedding, something happens in New York. There's a massive set piece where a couple of helicopters crash into the wedding, causing chaos. So the wedding is displaced while the Fantastic Four try to find out what the Silver Surfer is, what he's doing. And basically, he is a portent of what's to come with Galactus approaching the Earth. Galactus, as most of you will know from the comics, he was this huge costumed figure with this almost like a Viking-type helmet. Here, he's a big gas cloud. There is a scene which nods towards his comic strip origin when you see this cloud moving across space and he's got this sort of helmet-type horned thing. But I think you have to admit that it's a disappointment that he just turns out to be this sentient cloud of death that's moving across the universe. Ultimately, the Fantastic Four are involved in the capture of the Silver Surfer. They find out what he's there for, and they join forces and they battle to stop Galactus. Meanwhile, Dr. Doom, who was frozen at the end of the last film, is resurrected. He teams up with the Silver Surfer, and he sort of, there's a two-sided thing with him trying to stop the Fantastic Four, and there's a sort of an end battle. It's a fairly simplistic, straightforward story. Again, the problem is some of the comedy is just... I think it's even more noticeable here in that it's very creaky and detracts from the film. You get a repetition of the scene in the first film where the Invisible Girl ends up naked because her clothes have disappeared. I don't think they would do that sort of scene now. There's a subplot where they swap powers when they touch, which almost seems like padding for a 90-minute film, which seems unnecessary. So yeah, I think it's the same issue with Rise of the Silver Surfer as the Fantastic Four itself. The tone is too inconsistent. It needs to be more dramatic with humour rather than dramatic with comedy, because what we have here and in the previous film is comedy, and that for me doesn't necessarily work in dramas. I think you can have humour, you can have moments of lightheartedness, but I think when you suddenly throw in a slapstick comic scene in something that's dramatic, it just skews the whole thing. And I think it's the problem also with the Fantastic Four Rise of the Silver Surfer. Having said that, I did enjoy it. I felt, again, it was a bit short. At 90 minutes, it gets in and it's gone. But I think the script is quite good for what it is. Again, the cast are really good. I think there's some nice lines of dialogue, nice character bits between the characters. But it doesn't I suppose it doesn't serve the Fantastic Four as you want them served. These films are certainly the best versions of the Fantastic Four we've had so far, so I'm sure that Marvel will do the right thing by them. But I think... Oh, by the way, of course, Fantastic Four Rise of the Silver Surfer gets from me 6 out of 10. 6 out of 10. Don't think it's as good as the first one. I thought it, actually, rewatching it, I thought, well, this is better than the first one, but it actually isn't. Because I think it doubles down on the problems I had with the first one, and I think there are issues with slightly underwhelming finale, and of course Galactus is a letdown. But I think for what they are, I don't think these films disgrace themselves, and I think if you want to get a sense of who the Fantastic Four are before we see the new film, I think that these are a good watch. Don't expect this style of Fantastic Four in the new one that's coming out just under a year now, but I think it gives you an idea of who the characters are, what their power set is, and the sort of things that they get up to. Of course, the new film, which is being made now, is a period piece. It's actually called Fantastic Four First Steps. Some people have made a connection between that and the moon landing in 1969 because of the steps reference. But I think Neil Armstrong actually said one small step, not first step. So I think people are reaching a bit there. But I may be wrong. But no, it's interesting that it's set in the 60s. I think that's probably a good move because I think that's where most people's perception of the Fantastic Four is. It's characters from the 1960s. And I think it'll be interesting to see how it's done. I think Marvel will be very good at creating that 60s aesthetic. I think it might be a multiversy thing and that this is set in an alternative universe because otherwise you're going to say, well, where have the Fantastic Four been until now? And I think they will probably then become drawn into our universe to become part of what's going onwards because we know that they're going to be in the 2 Avengers films coming up as well. So, yeah, there's a lot to look forward to in terms of the Fantastic Four, and I really hope that this new film gets it right because the Corman version didn't, the Trank version certainly didn't, the Tin Story versions nearly did. They got so much right, but too much wrong, and I think that's where they fall down. But I think they're worth a look. They're really not bad films, despite what you may hear in other places. Okay, a quick word or two about the future of the channel. Channel's going nowhere. I know I haven't done a lot the last couple of weeks. I had that little COVID bout and that sort of... I think I'm still getting my strength back from that, and I haven't been in the right headspace to sit and do videos, but I'm starting to do a few more things now. For the rest of the summer, there will be more bits and pieces coming up. I'm doing my Spider-Man Revisited series. There'll be Spider-Man 2 coming up on the weekend. I'm setting up a new series called Classic Doctor Who Revisited. Somebody did mention a few weeks back they'd like to see me do reviews of classic Doctor Who serials. I don't do reaction videos. That's for other people to do. I don't bother doing that. But I will review classic stories, rewatching them again. And the first one I'll be doing will be The Brain of Morbius, which I'll be watching right after I've recorded this video. So that'll be coming up in the next few days. And there'll be new film reviews. I'll be putting up a review of M. Night Shyamalan's new film Trap, probably later this week. It's Thursday as I'm recording this, so it'll probably be tomorrow or on the weekend. So there's stuff coming. But what I wanted to say mainly about the channel is really about technical things. Now, I record my videos in my cinema room on my camera using the camera's microphone. And I think it sounds okay and I think it looks okay. But it probably could be better. So I have been over the last few days doing some research into microphones and lighting things. I don't want to go nuts with massive O-ring lights and stuff like that. But I'm going to lash up, hopefully, a better sound system, if you like, but some sort of microphone that plugs into the camera, an ambient sound thing which cuts out background sound, because I'm conscious in the garage there's a lot of traffic going on behind me, which is quite distracting. So I'm hoping to sort of work on those issues. So you'll hopefully notice improvement in that area in the coming weeks and months. So yeah, hopefully there's a lot more to come from this channel. So as I said, if you've enjoyed this look back at the Fantastic Four films, do the decent thing. Because you know it makes sense. Press that subscribe button there. That's the most important thing. Keep those subscriber numbers climbing up towards 800 and then beyond. Like is good for the analytics of the channel. And don't worry about that sort of stuff too much because this is just a thing for me to do that's fun. But hopefully people will enjoy it. And of course, the more people watch it, the better. But I don't look and agonize over analytics and things. I just want people to watch the videos and subscribe to the channel. Do those things. Make me very happy. Right, I will see you soon. Until I do, keep taking the stuff.